Tonight we're going to be doing the last lecture on the series that discussed business ethics. God willing, afterwards, we're going to go back to the series on Tehillim, on Psalms, and perhaps we'll also do a mini-series on Jewish mysticism. This is a very important topic. It's about how the mighty have fallen. How do the people who are on the top, who have been prosperous, whether it's a nation, whether it's an individual, whether it's a business, how do the mighty fall? What are the mistakes that bring about their downfall? It could also be an individual who was honest all his life. He began as an honest individual, an upright individual, and somehow down the road, he did something dishonest. He committed a crime. Throughout history, most intelligent people have fallen into the trap that their own nature has set up for them. Whether it has been unsatiable greed, which we've spoken about already, or whether it's arrogance, or simply many times people think that they can get away with it. Many people have fallen into a trap that they pretty much set up, their own nature sets up for them. And the first question that we need to ask is, why don't people learn from the mistakes of others? I mean, these kinds of mistakes have happened so many times and they recur. Why not simply learn from the mistake of others and hopefully you won't repeat them? A quote from Einstein, I believe, that he says that insanity is repeating the same mistakes over and over, expecting different results. People really think that perhaps the next time it's going to be different. They don't realize that if a mistake is a mistake, stop doing it. Do things the right way. Don't think you can get away with it. Just because it didn't work last time doesn't mean it's going to work now. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Look at great empires. Many empires that used to be great are no longer around. They vanished. Whether it was the old Egyptian empire, the Chow dynasty, the Hittite empire, the Greeks, the Romans. Once upon a time, you had mighty empires. What caused them to fall? What went wrong? At one time, they were great. They were successful. So even though in Judaism we attribute the decline of a nation, the rise of a nation to God, ultimately it's all from heaven, there are some natural explanations that explain why certain people, even though they started off doing something right, at some point in time they fail. And this applies to nations, this applies to even big companies. And many of you perhaps have heard of big companies that were big once upon a time, but something went wrong. And either they declared Chapter 11 or they went out of business. What went wrong? What caused them to decline? One factor that the experts point out is an undisciplined pursuit of more. You've achieved so much and you want more. If it's not planned out right, if it's not done with expert advice, if it's undisciplined, it could lead easily to terrible mistakes. But this desire for more is really what's behind a lot of the history of the downfall of whether it's a nation or of people. Wanting more and more power, wanting to get their hands on more. And if it's undisciplined, if it's unrestrained, it could easily, in a very short time, bring a person down. Even though he was successful until now, somehow he's not able to control it. Mistake after mistake will happen as a result of this unrestrained desire for more and for more. Just think about Napoleon, excellent example. He went on for a long time, taking over more territory before he fell. Nothing stopped him along the way, until at the end, of course, he couldn't continue. He was defeated. Another problem that comes up, and this is in mismanagement of companies, not having the right perspective or not evaluating the situation properly, is when there is a setback, and there are setbacks, take responsibility and don't begin to blame others for your failures, for the setback. This is also something that happens, that people do not tend to look inwardly, and they easily cast the blame on others. Others are to blame, instead of taking responsibility and trying to figure out what needs to be corrected. That's calling accepting responsibility. Don't blame external factors all the time. Many times, if you look closely, it's your fault. It's a bad decision, and do whatever it takes to correct it. However, I like to point out that a big factor in nations' decline, a big factor in why nations have declined historically, is in the lack of consistency. There seems to be no consistency from one administration to another, from one king to another, whether it's in the moral fabric of the society, whether it's in values, and especially in education. If you want what you achieved to continue on, if you want the next generation to inherit the same philosophy, the same values as you had, and for them to continue to succeed, then you have to give it over to them. You have to make an effort to teach them the same values that you held on to. Whatever recipe of success you had needs to be transmitted to the next generation, if you have such a recipe. But what happens in real life? Look at this country. You have a Republican administration, then you have a Democrat administration, and again a Republican, Democrat, different kinds of presidents, different priorities, different way of thinking, different philosophies. Then it should not come as a surprise if this nation is beginning to decline as well. There's no consistency. It's not what it used to be. Mistakes have happened. Mistakes have been made, right and left. Has anybody taken responsibility? Are they doing enough to correct those mistakes? Are they learning from the mistakes of the past? So this tremendous change in administration, lack of consistency in governing the nation, is a big factor, an important factor, and why a nation cannot continue to be as prosperous and as successful as it has been. Because whatever brought about its prosperity may no longer continue to be around. It may be that some president or some administration basically throws it out, throws out the recipe, and tries to make a new cake with a new recipe, and does not know that if you don't have the proper ingredients, if you don't bake it at the right temperature, it's just not going to come out right. So this is being done over and over, all over the world, where people are overconfident and they think that they can do well, that they can succeed, or they can do even better than the previous administration, and they don't realize that they may not have that recipe. So what you have here is a tremendous amount of overconfidence sometimes, and arrogance on the part of individuals, companies, and nations who think that their way is the right way. And obviously, at some point in time, it will blow up in their face. Mistake after mistake has occurred, and nobody assumed responsibilities for it. Nobody even realized what the mistake is. And little by little, the nation begins to decline. Now, if you add corruption to this, then that's a recipe for disaster. And we've spoken already about that. So a faulty administration that also is corrupt, then obviously it will not be able to last too long. This lecture, however, is not about government so much, it's not about nations. It's more about individuals. We're interested to know why individuals fail. How is it possible for a man to be good at one time and to commit a crime, to be dishonest? If at one point he was an honest individual, he was a good individual, he did not become evil overnight. So what went wrong? What caused him to fall or to fail? The easy answer is that man is his worst enemy. You've heard that? Man is to blame for much of what happens to him. And I'd like to use as an example the story of an individual called Toby Groves. You can look up the name on the internet. If you recall, there was a mortgage crisis in this country. There were many banks that failed, many mortgage companies that failed. And a lot of money was lost. A lot of banks closed. You recall that? The story of Toby goes as follows. When he was a young man, a teenager, I think, his father was very, very distressed that his older brother, Toby's older brother, was caught in a fraudulent act and was put in jail for the fraud. And the father asked Toby to swear to him that he will not do what his brother did, that he will be an honest individual and behave himself. And of course, Toby promised to his elder dad that he will always be honest and always do the right thing. He opened up his own mortgage company. He was doing very well in the beginning. But after a while, he got distracted. And because of his distraction, mistakes happened. Mistakes began to occur in the company. And one day he realizes that he's in debt, several $100,000. Okay, that was a big shocker to him, but what do you do now? How do you fix this debt? So he thought of an idea. He's going to take a loan on his house. After all, he wants to save his business. The problem is that if he were to do it right, to fill out the application with the right information, he would have to be lying about his income. But in the end, somehow, he was able to justify it, to save his business, and he put a large amount of money as his income. And he got the loan. But it didn't stop there. Eventually, he realized that his company was in bigger trouble than what he had thought of in the beginning. And now he owed a lot of money. So what do you do now? He had already taken the loan on his home. He had to fabricate loans. He had to make up new loans where people are taking out a loan on their home. And this way, he would be able to get the money he needs to pay off his debt, to keep his business afloat. Now, what's interesting about this is that in order to accomplish this, you need the cooperation of many people. People at work who know how to fill out the loan, the paperwork properly, the experienced brokers. You need title companies to go along with this plan. You need a whole bunch of people to collude, I think it's called in English, on this plan. And somehow they felt for him. Oh yes, we want to help you. Somehow they agreed to go along and do something that was very, very wrong. Fraud. But they did so. And sooner or later, what happened was that a lot of banks lost a lot of money, had to close down their doors, many people lost their job, and the FBI got involved. And they came knocking on his door, and he immediately admitted what he did. He couldn't figure it out. Why? He sat in jail for a couple of years staring at the ceiling. How could this happen to him? He'd swore to his father. He never was like that. He never lied. He never intended to defraud anyone. He was a good person. How could this happen to him? So that is the big question, right? How could an honest man, he started off as an honest individual, become dishonest? Or how could he fall? So what's the answer? So psychologists and all kinds of experts have tried to analyze the mindset of such an individual. But let me make it a little bit simpler by quoting to you Jewish sources. You've heard of the saying, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. People who are all the way on the top, people who have lots of money, people who are famous, for them the fall is much more painful. The consequences of their fall is greater. The rabbis, however, interpret that concept a little bit differently. What does it mean, the bigger you are, the greater the fall? Or the harder the fall? The rabbis tell us, Kol hagadol mechavero yitzro gadol himenu. The greater a person is, the more intelligent he is, the wealthier he is, the more he has, his yetzer, his evil inclination is greater. Temptations are not the same for all people. They actually grow. The challenges are more numerous for people who are on top, people who are famous, people who are in a very high position, people who are very wealthy. Don't think that their evil inclination or their temptations is the same size as the poor man or the average individual. The more you make, the higher you go in status, the greater the challenges are to remain honest. So you may have been honest early on when you were an average individual, making an average salary. But the more one is successful, it gets to his head at some point. It's not easy. It does not mean that for sure he will commit a crime. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the rabbis point out that the more a person has, or the higher position he's in, the evil inclination will be much more powerful to resist. He could still resist. He could be very successful in resisting the temptation, but it will be there, and it will be a more difficult temptation than for someone who's not as wealthy, who's not in such a high position. All right, we understand now somewhat what is to blame. The evil inclination. Yeah, but somebody has to pull the trigger. What triggers the fall? We're talking about the fall of the mighty, the fall of those who are on top, the fall of those who were once honest individuals. What triggers their succumbing to the evil inclination? It's not just a temptation. I mean, people have temptations all the time, and sometimes we resist and sometimes not. So what triggers the fall? Why did he fall for it? And the answer, the rabbis tell us, is En adam over avera ela ken nichnas bo ruach shtut. Man will not commit a sin unless a spirit of folly has entered him first. What's the spirit of folly entering us? It could either be that momentarily we think that something is a good idea, we somehow justify it, or we say, I'm only going to do it once. And there's a whole lecture about how the mind justifies and rationalizes almost anything. So a ruach shtut, a spirit of folly, is basically when one says, it's not such a big deal. Perhaps they won't even catch me. They won't ever discover it. I'm only going to do it once. So it could be that the individual really does not intend to do something wrong, and he knows it's wrong. We're not talking about someone who does not know. He's fully aware of what he's doing. But there's a trigger. And that trigger is a ruach shtut, the spirit of folly that momentarily enters him, takes over and says, well, it's not so bad after all. You're going to come out of it. You're going to pay it back. All kinds of excuses. Okay. But that's not where it ends. You know where the real problem lies? Person made a mistake once. Okay. That only happened once. Say sorry, correct it, and we're done with it. The problem is that the rabbis warn us. If you do it once, it could easily happen again. Avar avera v'shanabo, the rabbis tell us, if you made a mistake, you committed a sin, and you repeated it one more time, or numerous times, na'aset lo keheter. It's almost become permissible for you to do it. It's become easier for you to do it. The door now is wide open. Don't feel bad about the first mistake you made. Feel bad about the fact that now it's going to be easier to commit the same mistake or the same offense a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth time. It just becomes easier. There's less restraint. That is what one should feel bad about. That's more difficult to control. The first time, if it really only happened once, okay, we're only human. But the problem is not the once. The problem is now there's a certain momentum. There's a certain ease mentally. This individual is no longer as easily deterred to not do something wrong the next time. So this can go on. And that's exactly what happened in this story. Had he only done it once, he lied once, well, that was terrible to lie. He never lied, he never wanted to lie. Okay, it could happen. But look what happened to him. It didn't stop there. Why didn't it stop? Because once you do it, the door is open. That is the more serious problem. If you do it once, it may not stop there. One has to be extremely careful. Okay, now we have to understand, if that's the case, that there's a spirit of folly. There's a momentary insanity, as I like to call it, where a person really loses his mind, loses focus, that what he's doing is terribly wrong. What should he do about it? The rabbis tell us that many problems occur in life because of hesech hadat, because of distraction. Be careful not to be distracted from your main goal. You're a mountain climber. You want to make sure you're focused properly on getting to the top. Otherwise, if you make a small mistake, that can cost you your life. Not only will you not get there to the top, you have to be patient, you have to be persistent, not to give up, right? You have to obviously want to get to the top. You have to be focused. Focus is very important. But life is full of distractions. Who's the first one to distract in the Bible and the Torah? The serpent. He distracted Adam and Chava. How? They were just instructed by God. Don't eat from this tree. Don't eat from this fruit. And he says to them, well, wait a minute. You know what? If you eat it, nothing will happen. And you will be like gods. You will know everything. It's not only tempting them. It's not only tempting here. It's a distraction from the ultimate instruction. God told you not to. That's it. That is the clear instruction that you should have kept, that you should abide by. Don't be distracted from that. Otherwise, you'll find all kinds of reasoning, all kinds of excuses to go against that. So you have here a tremendous distraction. So what does Solomon tell us about distractions? He says it very clearly. Tov Shem Yeshem and Tov. Just remember, a good name, a good reputation is more valuable just than almost anything else that you can imagine. More than the most precious oils. Why is he telling this to us? Because some people may make the mistake of forgetting about what a good name is and how important it is to have a good reputation. Nobody wants to have a bad reputation, to have a bad name, to be a criminal, to be in jail. If people know for sure that that's where they're going to end up, and their name is going to be all over the place, if they would know so in advance, of course they wouldn't do what they were thinking of doing. So Shlomo Melech reminds us, remember, don't be distracted. A good name, a good reputation is so important. And if this has a chance of ruining it, then don't do it. Otherwise, people can easily be distracted and forget about that. Well, they don't think that anything is going to happen. People are not going to talk about him. People are going to forget. There's all kinds of ways that people get distracted. Shalom Aleichem says, don't get distracted from earning yourself a good name and a good reputation in your lifetime. That is what will be with you forever. Even after the person dies, they will still remember him, whether for good or for bad. That's something to strive for. So even though we've talked about a little bit about the people who are distracted and tempted, let's briefly go over now for a moment to the most unfortunate individuals of all. And they are the ones who have a problem with overconfidence and arrogance. And this I tend to speak a lot about because I've seen it. And I'm going to share with you a few stories that clearly bring this point out very, very strongly. How being overconfident or arrogant will end up in a person's bringing the demise of an individual. So let me tell you the first story, but before I tell you the first story, Shlomo Melech in Mishlei says the following: Lifnei shever gaon. If you ever see a shever, a collapse, a downfall of an individual, there is a good chance that before that there was gaon. It's a very interesting choice of words that he uses here to describe arrogance, according to one interpretation. That right before the collapse, there is a good chance that this man was extremely arrogant or overconfident, and that is what brought about his shever, his collapse. As I mentioned that earlier, arrogance and self-confidence is part of the problem. It's what some people have. Being overconfident or being arrogant can easily lead to a shever.
What's shever?
The collapse. So here's a story. My grandfather was in South Africa some 70 years ago to help out a certain institution. And he met there the famous Rabbi of Ponevezh, who was also there to raise funds for his yeshiva. And the Rabbi of Ponevezh told my grandfather this story. He says, you know, something very interesting just happened. This Jew came over to me, a very wealthy Jew in South Africa, extremely prosperous. He says, Rabbi, I don't understand something in the prayers that I say every day. In the prayers we say that God can bring down almost instantaneously those who are on the top, bring them down to the ground. And in one instant, he can also take those who are lying low and poor and raise them to the top. It can happen almost instantaneously. Rabbi, I don't understand this. You see, if God takes away what I have in South Africa, all the factories, my business here, I still have real estate in Manhattan. And if something happens to the real estate in Manhattan, I still have bank accounts in Switzerland. You mean to say, Rabbi, that God can take all of this away from me at once? And the rabbi looks at him and says, you don't understand. God doesn't have to take anything away from you. He can take you away from what you own. And guess what happened? 2 days later, this individual passed away. How could somebody talk like that? How could somebody think like that? Arrogance, overconfidence. No matter how young you are and how healthy you are, doesn't make a difference. A person can go just like that. Through an aneurysm, for example. Just like that, interrupted. Nothing to do with the genes. Nothing to do with his cholesterol. All of a sudden, you're here one moment and then you're gone. How could somebody be so arrogant and overconfident to think the way this man did? That's one story. Second story happened with one of the Rothschilds. Very prosperous family, bankers. This particular individual was one day checking out something in his safe. You know how we have walk-in closets? Well, this was a walk-in safe, big safe. And he walked in, he entered the safe, and he didn't realize it, but the door closed on him. He got locked inside. And he started banging on the door. Nobody heard him. Nobody heard him. Continued to bang, continued to bang. Hours go by, and he realizes that he's going to be dying in the safe. So he cut his finger a little bit. He made a little cut in his finger because he didn't have a pen. He took a piece of paper and he wrote the following: I think this is coming to me, that I'm going to die here of hunger. Because I once expressed with confidence that at the very least I will never die of hunger. Because he thought with all the money that he had, at the very least he will not die of hunger. You know, people can die from all kinds of other causes, natural causes. How could you say something like that? So he wrote with his own blood, I think this is coming to me, a punishment from above for having said something like that. We don't know. We have to be careful with what we say. Give you two examples, two stories of how arrogance and overconfidence can bring about a person's demise. Then you have the unfortunate situation where a husband and wife are getting along just fine. The husband is a very good man. The woman is also a very good individual. And one of them, or the two of them, begins to have an affair with someone else out of the marriage. And eventually this is discovered, and the whole marriage that was once upon a time a good marriage, an exemplary marriage, very devoted to each other, ends up in divorce. How could this happen? You know, if people are no good, if people are bad, we can understand it, but these are people that are good. And that is the question. Can good people do something that is wrong? And the answer is yes, once again. The Torah speaks about Isha Sota. The Torah describes such a scenario where the woman betrays the trust and does something terribly wrong, to commit an adulterous act. Or the other way too, if the husband does the same. Could this happen? Unfortunately, it has happened too many times. But they were good. But they were tempted. What is the temptation here? Well, one of the types of temptations that affect marriages is, I guess we can call it passion. They fall in love with someone else. And what does that love do? That fake love? It's intoxicating. It's a mishaker. Passion is not true love. It's you feel attracted, you feel, oh, this is going to make me so happy. This feels so good. She or he is so nice. But it's not real. And even if it were real, you already have what God gave you. And you were happy. It's not that you're unhappy. Then what's going on? You're falling for it? Yes. That evil inclination is very, very powerful. And you can bring down even the best. And Solomon talks about this too. That many are the men who have fallen because of the beauty of a woman's face. More or less, these are the words that he says. Many are the men who have fallen because of that, who were lured to do something terrible as a result of just beauty, passion, something which really has no meaningful value. But it's intoxicating, it's tempting. You also have an individual who sadly has abandoned his faith, who was religious once upon a time, and as they're called in Israel today, Chazar B'She'ela, Itpaker, became a non-believer. This really deserves to be spoken about by itself. It's a big topic of what is causing these individuals who were at one time religious, who believed in God, and all of a sudden they're very upset and they let go of it and go in the opposite direction. They drop everything, any attachment to their tradition. Very sad, especially for the family, where all the other siblings are doing what their parents expect them to do, following suit, following the tradition. And then you have this one, they call it, I think in English, the black sheep of the family. I don't know of any black sheep. I have haven't seen any black. Have you seen a black sheep? But anyway, they call them the black sheep. Outcast. What's going on in this young man or young woman's mind and heart? Well, obviously they must be very disappointed, hurt. Usually that's the case. But are they right to do what they're doing? Or is it just a reaction to a situation? They can't be so sure that what they're doing is correct. They are reacting to a situation instead of really thinking it through. There must be some mistake, and it's important to find out what turned him or her off. But it's a similar situation to what we're talking about. We're talking about individuals who started off doing everything right, normal, and somehow they changed. Somehow they veered away from tradition. Somehow they abandoned their family. Yes, people are upset, people are disappointed, but does that justify getting away from everything that you held in high regard, that was so precious to you in the past, important? How could you just drop it? All right, these things happen. People somehow are lured for all kinds of reasons to do things that are not proper. The big question right now is, what can be done about it? What is the best strategy to deal with all of these situations, whether it's arrogance or overconfidence or simply people who are easily tempted? What can be done? The first one is what the rabbis tell us, and this one really covers overconfidence and arrogance. Al ta'min ba'atzmecha ad yomutcha. Rabbis tell us a very important rule. No matter how intelligent you are, no matter how knowledgeable you are, no matter how much experience you have, don't trust yourself. Don't trust yourself that you are 100% right in everything you do, in everything you say, in how you think. Don't trust yourself 100%. You never know. You may be very mistaken. You may be doing something wrong. And therefore, it's very advisable to asel echarav. Consult with a rabbi, consult with an expert, consult with other people. Ask your wife. Ask other people for their opinion. Don't just rely on your own understanding. Before you do something drastic, before you make a major decision in your life, it's worthwhile to seek the advice of others. In Yiddish, there's a saying, Fragen sollst du fragen alle men, tun sollst du mit dein Kopf. What that means is to ask everyone, especially if they don't charge you. It doesn't cost money. Then do what your head says to do. In other words, evaluate. Evaluate everybody, What do you have to say about it? What do you have to say about it? I'm talking about people who are knowledgeable. Just like when you go, if you need to go for some major operation, you want to consult with 3 doctors and get their professional opinion. You don't want to take a chance. Because even though he's a doctor, maybe he doesn't really understand the procedure very, very well. Maybe he's only done it a couple times. So you want to get expert opinion. Don't trust yourself. Assume that there are others who are wiser, who are more experienced, who may know better, and you'll be safer in your decision making. This will help somewhat an individual who's suffering from this syndrome that we called overconfidence or arrogance. He's having to come onto someone else. He's having to submit to someone else, to consult with others. Yes, he only has what to gain by doing so. Rabbis also tell us, and this is more for those who need more of a deterrent, to hold them back from being tempted. They tell us, Da lifnei mi ata omed. Always remember before whom you stand, who your boss is. That very soon, before you know it, you're going to have to be giving a din v'cheshbon. You're going to be giving an accounting of what you did in this world, in your life. Keep that in mind. Stay focused on that. Yesh din v'yesh dayan. We are accountable for our actions. There is a judge, and there is a judgment. This is not a picnic where you get to just do anything you want, enjoy yourself, and not be responsible for what you do. We are responsible, just like we are responsible in a court of law, in how we interact in society. There's hopefully a law, hopefully there's a court, hopefully there are police and judges that enforce the law. Well, in the same way we have it down here, they have it up there. But some people do not think so. They don't believe that there's an afterlife, that there's a court, and they're in for a big surprise. Judaism stresses that this is very important to always keep in mind, because people forget about it. They don't see it, they're not focused on it. Well, weren't you stopped by the police once upon a time? Hopefully you never ended up in court, but if you did, don't you see how it works here? Well, it works the same way upstairs. So sometimes people need reminders, but hopefully we don't want these kind of reminders. We want to learn about it, and we want to remind ourselves, without getting into trouble, that we have to be very careful with what we do and be very responsible. So just remember before whom you stand, who your boss is, and what he expects of you. And the third idea is very helpful with those who are arrogant. Remember where you come from and where you're headed. You come from nothing, from dirt, from a drop. And you're headed also to the grave, to a place of earth and worms, where this physical body will decay. Hopefully these kinds of thoughts, which a lot of people don't like to think about, people don't usually like to think about death, will bring about a certain seriousness and humbleness to the individual, to make him less arrogant. Yeah. After all, you don't take all this money with you, right? After all, you're also going to be in the ground at some point in time. After all, everyone dies. So thinking about this, having these kind of thoughts, hopefully will help an individual be a little bit more humble instead of so arrogant. So these are just some ideas that can help individuals who have a problem, a certain weakness that is causing them to lose sight of the real purpose in life. What makes things more difficult in our generation, however, is the increase or the trend towards secularism. Because of this trend, people's mind today is being bombarded by competing philosophies. People are absorbing all kinds of ideas that are foreign to religion and put more of an emphasis on hedonism, materialism. So the mind today is absorbing so much trash. The mind is absorbing today a lot of trash, a lot of things that are more of a threat to the belief in God than supporting the religion, supporting faith. People today are surrounded by all kinds of influences that are drawing them away from what was once upon a time accepted, from traditional values. So what happens is that this trend is really causing many people to remain prisoners of their imagination instead of being able to focus on reality. And I call this imagination is because that is what the evil inclination is selling them. Something which is fake, something which is not real. It's imagined, just like with the husband and wife, imagining or thinking there's something better out there. So people are prisoners of their imagination. So long as they do not take over, do not take control over their instinct, over their nature, and assume responsibility for their actions, they're going to continue to be prisoners of this world of imagination instead of focusing on reality. All right, what do we tell the ones who have already made mistakes, who have come to terms with the fact that they did something wrong? Is it possible for them to get out of it? Is it possible for them to go back to being good people as they were in the past? And the answer is yes. I like to quote what Churchill used to say. Never give in. Never, 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 never. He spoke about giving in. But we can extend that idea to never give up. The same way you should never give in, as he said. Never give up. Failure is really something that people just perceive in their mind. It's not something of a physical state. It's more what people perceive. It's not a real thing. You didn't really fail. It's in your mind. It appears to be like you failed. And that is what teshuvah is all about. Judaism emphasizes the importance of teshuvah, of repentance, of returning to God. You've become distant. You've moved away. You've succumbed to your evil inclination, but you can always go back home. And God will open the door for you. You're always welcome. A lot of people don't take this opportunity of returning. And you know why? Some of them actually think that they're so wicked and so bad that they have no chance. The rabbis warn us, Al tihi rasha b'fnei atzmecha, don't think of yourself as a sinner, as a wicked individual. You've made mistakes. Well, that's what teshuvah is all about. Correct them. Go about and do something about it. You can still prevail. You can still reverse the decline. You've declined, you've moved away, you can reverse it. There's another pasuk, another verse in Mishlei. Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. A righteous individual sometimes falls 7 times, but he gets up every time. You don't stay down. It happens to the most righteous ones. They fall, they've made a mistake, they've succumbed. Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. He may fall, but he gets up. That is why it's important not to judge people in a negative way by saying, look at him, he's so religious and look what he did. Yes, maybe he succumbed. It doesn't mean that he's going to stay that way, that he's going to continue to be sick. Right, it doesn't mean that he's going to continue to do something wrong. Perhaps the following day he has already done teshuvah, he has already repented. Don't think bad about him. Unless, of course, you're dealing with somebody that does it to you again and again and again, whatever it is that he's doing. That's something else. But people make mistakes, and that's what teshuvah is all about, to give them a chance to come back and to repair the damage that they've done. But that may not happen so easily if the individual thinks of himself as a lost case, as a failure. Never tell anyone you're a failure. You want to give them some hope. And those children who have moved out of a parent's home because they couldn't get along, always leave the door open for them. Always tell them, I understand that you feel differently, we disagree, but the door is always open for you. There's a chance that that child will come back. Many parents have made the mistake of shutting the door. They don't want to talk to that child anymore. Be very careful not to do that. Children and adults sometimes go through trauma, all kinds of disappointments in life, very painful and emotional upheavals that cause them to act in a certain way. But they will one day mature. They will one day perhaps get over it, become stronger individuals, and come back home. And teshuvah means coming back home to God, returning to Him, realizing that we were wrong, that we were mistaken in what we did. And finally, there's one more solution. And I don't want to say if all fails, do this. Because this is something that one should do regardless at all times, and that is to pray. Why should we pray? What is the importance of prayer? Anybody know? Prayer is the most powerful connection that we have with Hashem, with God. The most powerful one of all. We remind ourselves how dependent we are on Him, how much we need Him for everything. Prayer reminds us that He is listening, that He sees us, that He's aware of us. Prayer is very, very special. Not so much because we believe that God will answer our prayers, He may or may not. But this is a chance that we have to talk to Him. And if He's listening, maybe he will help us. I say maybe because it all depends what kind of help we need. Right? God wants us to first take the first step, and then he will come and help us with the next step. We can't ask him do this job for us. So prayer is important because it also helps restore clarity of purpose in life, which a lot of people don't have. What are they doing here? What's the meaning of life? By praying, we continuously remind ourselves, yes, life has some purpose. God is looking after us. Things are not as what we would like them to be, but we still have a chance. And that chance is to turn to him and ask him to give us that clarity. And that clarity, what it will do is it will give us the confidence, the positive and healthy confidence that we need to live a life based on the true values, not on imaginary values. On the true values. Where are we going to get that confidence if people make fun of you, if you're doing things that are not accepted in society? Where are you going to get that strength, courage, and confidence to go against the norm, against the trend that we were talking about? Where? From a certain clarity of purpose. And for that, we need God's help. Give us that clarity that we're lacking sometimes. We don't know, we're in doubt. People are full of doubts. Even though they know a lot, they still don't know why are certain things happening in their life. And that can cause them to lose faith. That can cause them to move away from their faith. They need that clarity. They need the confidence. They need the reassurance that God is listening to them and that he will help them. And, of course, ultimately, if we have the clarity, that will also help guide us to the right destination. People are distracted on the freeway. How are they distracted? Either they're talking on the phone, text messaging, looking on the side. What are they looking at? At an accident, usually.
Yeah.
Don't they realize that if you're looking at someone else's accident, you're going to get into an accident yourself? Keep your eyes on the road. Otherwise, you're not even going to pay attention to the signs, and you're not going to get off where you're supposed to. Don't you want to arrive at your destination safe? Then you better take responsibility. Driving is a great responsibility. There are many dangers in driving a car. So therefore, keep your eyes on the road. But some people are on the road, but they don't even know where they're going. Have you ever met somebody like that? They think they know where they're going. Have you ever met somebody going on the bus, and if you ask them where you're going, he says, I don't know? Yes, there are people who, even though they claim they know where they're going, they don't really know where they're going. Because life is a journey. This journey has many stops, of course, but the journey is not about going from point A to point B. That is, where people go to work, people move, people travel. The journey of life is a journey where each human being has a mission, a special mission, and along with that mission comes certain challenges. Challenges including temptations, marriage, friendship, neighbors, friends of all kinds of obstacles along the way. And God expects of us to grow and to mature and to become acquainted with his world, and hopefully to do the right things and to overcome any challenges and not fail. That's what he expects of us. And according to Jewish tradition, if we do a good job, we will be rewarded for it. Otherwise, life has no meaning. Why do we come here? What are we here for? It's difficult. It's not easy. Is it really worth it? Look how many people committed suicide. Look how many people are sad. What's going on here? If we were to think a little bit more deeply into it, we would realize that there must be something to it. There must be something that is expected of us. But without that clarity from somewhere, from the Torah or from any other source, we would not only not know what to do, we would continue to make mistake after mistake. And part of that has to do with the fact that physically the human being is more likely to follow what those physical needs are. And not think about what the true purpose of everything is. That's ultimately what we have to think about. It's not just about the physical self. There's something else there that's greater and more important than that, and that is our soul. And we have the advantage, the Jewish people have that tremendous advantage of having the Torah. If we were to look to the Torah, if we would learn the Torah, then we would be able to draw the information that we need to succeed. And even then there's no guarantee we will succeed, because that evil inclination is still going to be there, as we said earlier. The greater one is, the more powerful that evil inclination will be. However, the advantage of having that source is that we can always turn to it and draw from it important insights as to what is the correct thing to do and what's not. And if we do that along with consulting with others and being careful that we don't repeat the same mistakes, then there's a better chance that we will succeed. A lot of mistakes can be averted if people were to consult with others and not rush to do something before really thinking about it. Something that is a major decision in life, be well thought about, because we are biased and we're not always thinking properly and we don't always have clarity. And that is, again, where prayer is so important, that it reminds us that we're so feeble, that we're so fragile, that we're not as smart as we think we are, that we can easily make a mistake. So God, you're the only one that can hopefully help us to do the right thing, to give us the clarity that we need to get safely to our final destination. B'ezrat Hashem.